that we are actually worthy of seeking more if we want it. What I often say about pleasure is that pleasure teaches us a new language of worthiness.
Yeah, huge.
Welcome to the Core Insights podcast, the podcast that dives deep into the heart of human potential. Here at Core Insights, we're peeling back the layers of human experience to reveal core truths that drive personal growth, authentic living, and peak performance. Each episode will be joined by members of our exceptional Core Elements team, seasoned therapists and coaches who are passionate about helping you unlock your full potential. We're not just sharing theories from textbooks. We're sharing real-world wisdom gained from years of practice, cutting-edge training, and most importantly, the profound experience of working with clients just like you. Let's begin this journey together. Welcome to Core Insights, where transformation starts at the core.
Brittany Policastro in the house.
We've been so happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy you're here, waiting for this podcast forever. Erin's heard me talk about you, I'm sure, for the past 18 months or however long it's been, forever.
Yeah.
I gotta go into
my Brittany.
The infamous Brittany.
I am very happy to be here, and it has been a while, but we're here now.
We're here. We're here. We've arrived. So I want to talk about lots of things today. I want to talk about, vulva owners and how we can embrace and understand and grow and reconnect with, all the parts of our sexuality and our inner, beings. I want to talk about somatic healing and the trauma stories. But let's kind of first start with how did you get into this? The reason I picked you as a coach, is because you were outside of my boxes. I'm like, I want someone, right? I want someone that does the IFS and does things I do for sure. That speaks my language a little bit, but also that does Tantra and does, body stuff. And is when I watch your videos, you trigger all my stuff of insecurities. I'm like, you're so brave and confident to go and dance on Instagram. I'm like, oh my gosh, myself and I could never do that.
I'll never forget when I learned about your guys' working together, and I would go Alicia's schedule, be like, oh, when can I come in and watch and observe? Because I had started as a student, and literally you were blocked out as sex lady.
Yeah, sex lady.
And I was like, okay. And I'm talking to my student, and it's like, well, I guess can't come during that time, I guess.
We're in sex lady.
Yeah. Her and sex lady are having a meeting.
Yeah,
so we are. Okay, great. I'll keep that. And then eventually she's like, no, it's ready. No.
Yeah.
She's super cool.
So cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
To
because I wanted to learn about how to work with clients that are polyamorous and, different, all the different things and my own journey. And so you just bring such I think, knowledge and a different way of speaking. Even my husband who's come to some sessions is she gets you. I'm like, I know. And that's hard. I'm a hard client because I'm a therapist. And so most therapists can outsmart and I can speak it better than them. So
we win therapy.
Right. We're terrible clients.
You were a great client. You were an easy client for me. And I mean that is in a big compliment.
I'm sure it was hard sometimes. Yeah.
It was I love when people can dive in and do the work and speak the language, even though it's, this isn't therapy, but, it does have some overlaps with that. And so, yes, sometimes working with therapists can be a particular adventure because they know all the things. And sometimes it can be really fun and exciting because they know all the things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So my journey, how did I get here? Well, I've been in the business of transformation for over 20 years. I started as a yoga teacher when I was 22 years old. I'm 44 now. And it came at a very pivotal moment, which really still ties into even what I'm doing now, because I was in a very intense and what I would call emotionally abusive relationship with someone who was very controlling and who was very specifically controlling of my sexuality and of, not just me finding other people attractive, but people finding me attractive. And I got a lot of attention in my 20s and I would get in trouble for it, right? It would be this big thing. And I found yoga when I was with him. And as soon as I took a class, I was like, oh, I'm home. And, 22 years later, that really was the seed that was planted for me that took me to where I am now. And so that relationship obviously took a toll. I was in it for over 3 years. It was also a relationship where I contracted STI. I attracted, contracted genital herpes. And I've written all about this. It went viral on HuffPost many years ago, which really created the shift into talking about sex and sexuality. And, I was writing a blog at the time in 2016. It was right before I opened my relationship, we were together for 5 years at the time. And at this point I was teaching yoga, and I started to shift into coaching because my yoga classes were great. I mean, I'm a very confident person. I will say that, because they were very therapeutic. They were very deep, and people wanted to do more with me. And so I started working with people one-on-one, and started to apply a lot of the things that I was learning from different trainings. And then I started talking about sex and writing about sex and posting about sex, and people felt safe. People could talk to me because they knew I wouldn't judge them. They knew they could be in conversation with me. And then I wrote that article, and, I got lots and lots and lots of emails from people that were like, oh my God, like I feel seen. I feel like I'm not alone. So that was really what began to birth the specifics of, like, I've been doing this work for years and years, facilitating and holding space for people's transformation and making sure that they feel seen and heard and understood. But when I put sex into it, it was like, oh, like, this is the thing that people don't have the opportunity to feel seen and heard around, even sometimes in other coaching sessions, even sometimes in therapy. Like, I've had clients and they're like, I don't really talk about this particular trauma with my therapist. I don't talk about this with my therapist. And a lot of the clients that I see are clients that, some of them have done a lot of therapeutic work, which is great and important and significant. And they never focused on whether it's the sexual trauma or how the sexual trauma lives in their bodies. And so, it was just this kind of perfect storm of these things came to me, and I just followed it. And then, I took the trainings and did all the appropriate things, and then put it all on Instagram, and it really started to expand.
Nice. Cool. That idea of, like, not talking about it in therapy, or not talking about, in whatever space you're in, that speaks to, like, I think so many, my story for sure. I think just stories in general of, like, for me, I think it's relatable, my story of, like, the idea of sex. And so there's, like, all of these boxes and barriers and boundaries and beliefs and culture and religion and like all of these things that, they're conflicting. So I have this, like, part of me that's, like, sexual and goddessy and questioning and curious. That's that piece. And this part of me that feels shameful, that has trauma. And this part that's like, oh no, this is the box of religion and duty and marriage. And like that is so conflicting and so messy that my islandy self is like, I'm gonna put that all in a box over there. I'm just gonna, like, put that in the corner, because that's a whole lot to write unpack. So I'm gonna do what feels good and be the mom and do the business and just, like, live in this box. Society says that one's good and safe. And that box, I'm just gonna, like, not really focus on. So every one of your art sessions were like, bring her to the room. And I was like, what do you mean bring her to the room? Like, she's in a box and locked for like 40 plus years. Her. What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same things. I mean, I had a part who was in a back room of, like, a convenience store, and she was, like, tied up, and she was, like, back there. And, my therapist was like, you're gonna bring her out, right? You're gonna bring her in, right? And so, I think that the reason for that is because it's not a safe space to bring it out in most containers. It's not, because we don't know how to talk about sex, because there's a lot of fear around talking about sex in particular containers. We can't talk about sex at work. We can't talk about sex with certain people. We can't talk about sex with family. Like, there's so many places where we're not supposed to talk about sex. Yet we all have sex. Yeah. Most of us, most people, most adults, right, have sex, and teenagers have sex. Yeah. They're having sex, but yet we are supposed to walk around like it's not happening. It's not a reality. Yeah. And, I don't know about you, but for me, like, I am a very direct person in many ways. And so that has always felt so sticky, like in my body, this idea that like, we're not supposed to talk about this. And frankly, like that wasn't me. I always talked about it, which is why we're here now, because I talked about it and people were like, oh, please, yes, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this in a way that's respectful. Let's talk about this in a way that is fun. Let's talk about this in a way that's honest and raw. And, you know, there's just a lot of people and even leaders that just get like, oh, I don't want to, I don't know what to do. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend. I mean, even in the amazing movement of Me Too, there's even more of that of like, I don't want to do the wrong thing and consent and all of this. And so instead of actually doing the work to learn how to be in these conversations in a productive and supportive way, it's more like, no, we don't do this. We don't talk about this.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting too. And like, even in our work, right? Like I can openly say that going to therapy, talking about sex was like off the table. I'm just gonna deal with like my family, you know, partnerships, divorces, whatever it was. That's like, obviously those are the bigger things, the bigger fires that need to be put out. But what's interesting to me is that like the basic underneath of that skill that we talk about often, and even in my practice, is like communicate.
Yeah.
Talk with clarity, know what you want, like who are you stand, like what do you stand for, like what, be present in that space. It's not about someone asking, you know, obviously permission and consent, but like asking permission for you, like, hey, do you mind if you tell me what you want? Instead of like, hey, I want this. Can you do this? It's such a different landing that like underneath it all comes from that like communicative confidence. Who am I? It's not necessarily taboo about sex. We've made it that this like container of like, that's sticky and we're women and like keep things tidy. Right. I think there's a lot of pressures that come from that. But the reality is like what we've done is really muffled our capacity to be able to communicate, to be able to like speak our needs in such a different and more profound way, even if it's something that feels uncomfortable.
And even know what those are. Like, I think even those boxes, they don't even know what those are. Like even unpacking, like, I think that's a good place to start with people is like, how do you help clients unpack all of the boxes? Like you have this too, like a label of like the yellow brick road you talked about. I went down the yellow brick road. It was always supposed to, and then was like, oh, I don't actually like men. What am I doing here? Right? Oh, take it
like smacks you in the face. Like, no, thank you.
What the heck?
It hits you. Hard. Yes.
And so where do you start with clients to help them even know? Because I think people listening to be like, I don't have that, or maybe I really have that, but I even came in being like, I know I have some of that. I've done my work. I've done lots of stuff. I got my therapist. I've done all my therapy. And then I was like, oh,
Sure.
Wow. It's way louder than I thought it was actually still. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first I want to speak to what you said, Erin, around the needs, right? Because that's usually a big place to start because it's one of the number one focuses that I have with clients, sometimes roadblocks that are there because most of the people that I work with, most of the relationships that I have, that's shifted a little bit, but I call in a lot of people pleasers, a lot of people that are people pleasers. I am not a people pleaser. You know, maybe it comes up every now and then, but I'm more of a boundary pusher, right? I'm more of someone that pushes boundaries, and that's my work, right? That's something that my partner's favorite thing to say when I do that is, you're not respecting my boundaries. And I'm like, oh, well, now you have to go ahead and call me out because now I have to respect your boundaries. But, so the power in that, though, because it's something that I work on and I'm clear about, is that I tend to attract the opposite. Same with clients. I tend to call in a lot of clients that are, and it's pretty typical in my experience, that a lot of women tend to be people pleasers. Now, that's not me, but a lot of women do. And I get it, I understand it, and put motherhood on top of that, and the nuclear family structure, right? Like, and I it's a really important thing to talk about I feel like we could get into that in a little bit when we talk about some of the things that make it so hard for women to actually embrace pleasure and their sexuality, because women tend to, right, cis women in heterosexual relationships, especially, tend to take on the emotional labor, take on, be a part of this nuclear family, which means they need to show up in a very particular way. And, for me, I can see into those things because I've not chosen that path. I've chosen another path for myself. I'm polyamorous. I am child-free by choice. It was something that I thought I was going to do, and then chose not to because I knew that it wouldn't actually align with my values and my needs. I knew that. And so, it makes my life a lot easier in a lot of ways because I can pursue the things that are really important to me, because I'm not a part of that nuclear family structure. But a lot of people are, more people than not, of course, are. And so how do we work within that, right? And so the idea of meeting of needs, of what are my needs, and then how do I ask for them to be met? And so this isn't even, now, of course, this comes up in sex a lot, but if it comes up in sex, most likely it's coming up in other places. And oftentimes sex is the scariest place for it to show up because you're naked, you're vulnerable. It's easier to dissociate or to check out or to just get stuck in the head. I mean, sex is activating. Sex mobilizes our nervous systems. Our blood pressure can go up, our heart rate, all these things can go up, right? And that's exciting. And we need to be able to balance that with, to have that flexible nervous system. And a lot of people don't. And so that's something we have to think about when we're getting into sex, that if you have a hard time asking for your needs to be met outside of the bedroom, you may have an even harder time inside of the bedroom. Right? And then we're not even talking about if there's trauma, and it doesn't have to be sexual trauma, just trauma of any kind can also be exacerbated by the experience of sex and in partnership, right? And so some of the things I do with clients first is, well, there's a couple of things. Needs and boundaries are most of the time, like throughout, it is a thread. And this was even before I was doing the focus on sex and sexual healing. Even before that, when I was just doing transformation coaching with mostly women, that is what we worked on. We worked on boundaries, and we worked on really, what are my needs? What am I feeling? What am I need? What do I need? What's a strategy to get those needs met? Right? Very like nonviolent communication. So that's important to recognize that. But it's also important to understand that even if you do know your needs, that expressing them during sex can be really scary.
Yeah. And knowing your needs. Like that was, again, I
Yeah.
these things, and you gave us the homework of like the pleasure journal. And like, oh, like, if this is pleasurable sitting like this, would it be better to just lean forward? Or like how can I make this moment a little more pleasurable in all the areas all the senses that I'm aware of at any given moment in time? Oh, it just opened up a whole door of like pleasure as a daily practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. This was something before I learned so something called the 10 spot, which was developed by Davey Ward, who's the founder of Authentic Tantra. The 10 spot was something in some ways I was doing before I even learned what it was. And it's amazing, right? It's an amazing tool. And what it is basically, if 1 isn't much pleasure and 10 is, in any given moment, could you be at a 10? And doesn't mean that, every single need is being met. Like you're in Hawaii being fanned by sexy people and fed strawberries. Like that's not what it means. It means that in any given moment, my need, like I feel really good and I'm content, and the needs that I have in this particular moment are being met. And to recognize that most of the time that we can go up that pleasure scale, even a couple, maybe not a 10. It's not about seeking better. It's about recognizing that in the moment that we are actually worthy of seeking more if we want it. Like it's possible. And that most, it's the I'm fine, it's okay, right? Like this happens. And so what I often say about pleasure is that pleasure teaches us a new language of worthiness.
Yeah, huge.
what a massive word too.
Huge.
Like deserving, worthiness.
Yeah,
like,
huge.
Yeah.
Again, even in my own story and in my kind of journey is like worthiness was a massive word. And I think it's not unique in the essence of like, I think a lot of women and people in general struggle with that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Worth and
Yeah.
I deserve, right? Because if I say that I deserve something, then it comes from like a selfish place, or maybe I'm, the big token word of narcissism, or like I'm walking around in the world thinking that, I deserve all these things. Well, it's like, no, actually, we own the space we have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if that means that I am worthy and that I am deserving of what my needs are, exactly what you said. If it's a 1, how can I make it a 2?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And how that worthiness is like so intricate, so woven into all the layers. Like you think you're like, okay, I'm pretty good here. And then you pick another layer and like, oh, here's another one. There's another like pot of worth I get to grow and evolve with. So that 10 spot thing for me has been massive.
And I think what we have to recognize, and I know you all know this, but what we have to recognize is that it is a journey. It's never going, it's worthy, especially worthiness, like our relationship with worthiness, we're not always going to feel, even if we do all the work and all the healing and that feels really good, there's going to be moments where we still don't feel worthy. There's going to be moments when we try to outsource our safety. Like that might still happen. Like I have, especially in the past 3 years, have spent a tremendous amount of time and focus and intention on healing some of my own trauma, and can say confidently that I have crossed a bridge into a space where I am more at home with myself and in myself, and more resourced in safety with all of my parts, and a presence for my parts. So they feel safe, right? It's not even needing to have big conversations with them anymore, as much as just being that presence that they need, right? Like, which is amazing. And at the same time, even this week, I was noticing some outsourcing was happening of needing some validation, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Like I see you. Okay. Like let me go outside and take a walk and touch my trees, and like do the things that." And even as I was doing that, I was literally this morning I did that, and something came through, which was. Because sometimes, I'm a tree hugger. Let's be real. I'm a very grounded tree hugger.
We get you.
But I'm from Philly, so I got some grit, right? But when I connect with trees, sometimes it's almost like, what can they give me? Like what kind of like inspiration or connection or message can I get? And today it was like, baby girl, like this is about you. This isn't about me getting something from a tree. This is about me tapping into my own presence and my own power and my own resource. And it came through so clear. And really that's what I support women in doing, is supporting them and tapping into their own power and their own resource, because there's so much of this external outsourcing and resourcing. And yes, like co-regulation is amazing. And there's a lot of things that are really good. So yes, partnership, there's healthy attachment. Yes. And it all always starts inside of us in our own safety and our own resource.
Yeah. And I love that you said it's a bridge and it's a journey. Because I think my like very type A brain was like, okay, across the bridge. At a moment where I was like, Brittany, across the bridge. I was so excited. I'm like, I'm on the other side
now.
Woo-hoo! And then all of a sudden, it picks up, I'm like, oh, I'm back in the pit. And I'm like, it's over. Done. I'm spiraling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I do think that there's still like there is a bridge in healing that we can cross, right? Like it doesn't mean that I still don't get moments of getting dysregulated or even dissociated or things like that, but it's like, I know I crossed that bridge, right? Or whatever it is, that feels maybe like a setback in moments. It's like, but wait a second, let me remember like who the hell I am and what I have accomplished.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because it can be hard to remember that. And that's one of the things that I think us as guides in transformation in whatever way, it's, we have to point out, like, do you see the links? Like, do you see how this links? Do you see how this connects? Like, do you see, like, sometimes we have to like just show a little bit and remind and be like, oh yeah, didn't realize that. I didn't realize how
Yeah.
far I've come, you know?
Yeah.
Or the flavors of that too, right? Like I think
Mhm.
even you're sitting here talking, and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was married to a man previously, and we worked together for over a decade. And then it was like, I didn't just wake up one day and was like, oh, I'm gay. And then I just like went on my merry way,
Yeah.
skipping with rainbows and butterflies. It was like, oh, well,
Crap.
this is new. Right. And now I'm married to my beautiful wife and have this amazing life together. And still, some of the things that I experienced as a young hetero, quote unquote, woman, I still experience them as a gay woman, is what I identify today.
Of course.
Those same things come up because the trauma and the things are still there.
Yeah.
And the journey of doing that. It doesn't mean I didn't cross a bridge.
Yeah.
It means the flavor tastes a little the same, but maybe it's a bit more potent this direction than the other direction, or, that tickles in the same way, but it's not the punch it was before.
Yeah.
I can notice what it is, but it doesn't mean it goes away indefinitely.
Yeah.
There's not some magic, golden nugget that is like, oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I'll never have the experience I did in my hetero marriage that I did in my gay marriage.
Yeah.
And relationships are relationships. They actually don't care what gender you are.
Yeah.
It's just,
No.
right? Like,
Or sexual orientation. They don't care.
no, they don't care. So those foundations are still, that's really raw. And if I didn't know what and I continue to, as I change as a woman, just in general, my needs in pleasure and desire and sex and all of those things, because to me are very different compartments. And as I show up in those compartments, they continue to change, regardless of who I'm with. And I have to continue to learn that and my needs and being able to find them and like, okay, how do they shift? Or how maybe that's different today because I'm, 3 days off my period and I'm bloated and I don't feel good and my my nervous system feels funny. So I need something different.
Yeah.
But my ability to do that is because I started the process of what do I need and what feels better for me.
Yeah.
It's not done.
Yeah.
It's like this continual learning process that feels like Everest sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And the bridges.
Yeah.
To go or
Bridge.
right.
Oh, bridge. Means there's more hill.
Right. But it speaks to the journey part of it for sure. And it speaks to like the having, like you said, a coach or a mentor or someone that's that's kind of mapping with you. Because you cross the bridge and come back and it feels like in your body such a setback, to use that word. Like it feels like, for me, it felt shocking. And I was like, do you imagine our clients feel? So to have a coach or someone kind of guiding and being like, hey, I'm also written the map here. Let's just remember where you just were. Yeah. And you're on the side of the bridge now. You slid down Everest a little bit, but look where you just were. Like, the path is still there to get there. So I think that piece is huge. And the piece that you're speaking to that my body's feeling is like the somatic piece of like, it's hard to remember because my body's catching up still. Yes. My body's catching up with like this new experience, and it had an experience, but it still has blueprints, nervous system memories of all the past experiences.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, there's so much I want to say right now. Okay. So I want to talk about the nervous system blueprints for sure. And before that, I want to talk a little bit about the things that this ties into all of that, the things that change as we become more of who we are, who we already were, right? Like the more that we shed those layers, those narratives, and that's another thing that, I didn't mention, that is one of the first things that I do with, women when I talk to them, and when I used to work with men as well, is I talk about dismantling those sexual narratives. And that is literally a lifelong process, a lifelong process. Yeah. And the more that we, and I use the term coming home to ourselves, which to me is interchangeable with like resourcing safety within ourselves, feeling seen and heard by ourselves, from ourselves. The more that happens, and the more that we cross that bridge, as we're saying, the more that our needs are going to change, especially around sex. For example, for years, I was a hypersexual person. Now I am, I had childhood sexual abuse, and that was repressed, and I didn't even know about that, right? Of course, that imprint was there, right? And so I was hypersexual. It's very common. And I loved sex and orgasms, and I could orgasm, and all of that stuff was wonderful. and felt really good. I also absolutely used sex to resource safety. I needed to be the best. I needed to be the best lover. And then, oh, don't even get me started when I got into polyamorous relationships at first, because there were people I could literally be better than.
Yeah.
And I was.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it was a hot
Together, I'm like,
mess.
hold on.
It was,
I
it
gotta hear some
was.
stories about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still polyamorous and now it's amazing. And what happens when we're in what are relationships? There's school in which to learn and grow and heal and bring more people into the pot. It's just more. And so, I've been in a 13-year relationship with my partner and my nesting partner, and who is securely attached. And I've always felt really safe with him. And because he really was able to meet me where I was at. And when I got into polyamorous relationships, that was different, right? I met a lot of avoidantly attached people. I had an anxious attachment, and all of my stuff would come up. And so sex was like a really, really big part of that. And I was so hypersexual. And then I started doing some of the deeper healing work on my own trauma that I didn't even know existed. I sensed for many, many years, but didn't know existed. And once that happened, and I really came home to myself more authentically, I was in a more of an authentic relationship with sex. What I needed from sex completely changed, completely changed. And I see this sometimes, and especially, with clients who maybe are polyamorous, who are, they do have some freedom to explore in particular ways. And they're like, well, I need to be with all the people and I need to do this. And it's like, what does your body want? Right? What does your body want? Because what I have learned and discovered and committed to, especially in the deepest dive of my sexual trauma and of bringing those parts so, so close to me, is a deep, unwavering commitment to always meeting my body where she is, and to always giving myself what I need. I mean, first.
Yeah.
And it is such a deeply woven commitment that I don't doubt it for a second anymore. Like, I do not doubt it. Is there sometimes self-betrayal that still happens? Sure. But do I catch it, and do I come back home, and do I really come into that space? Yes, because that committed, because now I know and I see and I understand what it takes to live a life that is in alignment with my deepest wants and needs and power and purpose.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what it takes. And so I'm like, I'm in, like, forever.
Yeah. So how do you do, I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I want you to talk about how you teach people to connect to their yoni space, to their body in general, but their yoni especially. And because that part of receiving for me was, again, a game changer of like, oh,
Yeah.
when she's really ready to receive, there is no pain,
Yeah.
friction. Like it's like it's really different compared to the boxes of like the shoulds and the do, whatever. Right. So, it's a different connection. It's a different, like literally a different part of me. She's a living entity in my body of like, I'm like, hey sister, how we doing? What do you need? How you feeling? And she kind of runs that part of me.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes back to just what we were talking about somatics and what we feel in our bodies and what we hold in our bodies and the information that we store in our bodies. That is different from the thoughts that we keep, right?
Yeah.
Those are two different things. And when, trauma, we experience trauma in our bodies, not really in our minds. We can think about it and we can conceptualize and we can talk about it, and talking about it is very helpful, of course. But in my experience, there is an embodiment that needs to happen. And specifically when working with women to heal their relationship with sex or to transform it, whatever it is that usually that's at the core of it. And like I said, first we have to get into those sexual narratives, right? First, we got to do that. then, well, first we have to create a foundation of safety and resource. Then we get into those sexual narratives. Then we start to talk about those feelings and those needs, and we start to get curious about that, the language of pleasure. And in the midst of that, we start to, you know, I support women in actually connecting with their bodies. And one of the first things I do, and this is, you know, this is from a colleague, Dr. Timmery Schmidt, who has a PhD in sexology, who I have done lots and lots of work with over the years. She's amazing. One of the things we've done so before I was even doing coaching like I do, her and I were teaching something called sexual being, which was in 2016 when all of this was like happening. And we did that for several years, and it was a 2-day intensive, and it was so amazing. And one of the things that we did in that, and now I do with clients, is, and it's one of the first things I do, sometimes even the first session, is body love letters. And they write love letters to their body. Now, I don't include the yoni in this. I include, usually we do eyes, we'll do hands, we'll do butt, we'll do thighs, belly, like some of those places that women have been taught to have negative feelings about. So we do that, and some of the letters are just so beautiful. And I wait a little bit before we actually, like, I do a whole session that's devoted to the yoni. And one of my all-time favorite practices that I do with clients is I have them, we do, you know, a specific Tantric breath, which gets them, you know, into vagus and into ventral vagal and into a space of feeling and feeling resourced and grounded. And then I have them write a letter from their yoni, their vulva, their pussy, some people say that word, like that word, to them.
Yeah.
And if I notice they're like in the head, you know, the eyes are going up and they're in the head, I'm like, okay, like let's bring it back, which usually once we get that breath, they're pretty dropped in.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's brought tears to my eyes, and to their eyes, and some of the things that they have written. I mean, it is so crystal clear that their vulvas have something to say. I mean, like, oh, so beautiful. Telling them how resourced they are, telling them what a lineage they have, how much power is here, how much their vulva wants them to experience pleasure. It just goes on, and it's so beautiful just to sit back and because I have them read them, and just to have them express this, and to be like, whoa, like this part of my body is communicating with me. And then I have them write a letter the opposite way, a love letter to their vulva or yoni.
Yeah.
And this is such a powerful thing, because and this is the first piece, maybe there's lots of sexual practices that I teach them how to do, tantric practices, which are somatic practices, which starts to bring in an awareness and a touch. And all of this, what I hear from clients is that they are like, wow, like I don't think about my vulva like this. I don't touch my vulva like this. It's either, and when we think about it, we touch our vulvas to clean our vulvas. Maybe if there's something like going on down there, we'll look at it for that reason. And yeah, we'll touch our vulvas for sex, but even that, it can be very transactional, the ways that we touch our vulvas, even for sex. And so, you know, what would it feel like to engage with your body in this way, just for connection, just for pleasure, like just to feel like, oh, like I see you, and I want to learn from you. Like it is my belief that our pussies are powerful, they're powerhouses, and they have a lot to say, and they have a deep intelligence that is like resourced into the source. I mean, it's our wombs. And even if we're not using our wombs to, you know, create a baby, which I've chosen not to, there's still so much power there. And especially even if we're thinking from an energetic standpoint, which Tantra is really all about the energetics and how we tap into that to create healing within ourselves.
Yeah. From this side of things, everything you just said, I totally concur with, but the letter that Yoni wrote to me first in that space, it shocked me. I was like, obviously I was crying when I read it back, but I was like, because, I top down was thinking I have like shame and guilt. I feel bad. And I've like, I've neglected her and all these things. And it was such a forgiving, motherly, I love you. I was like, who wrote that? Like, it was mind blowing. Actually, it was huge. And then to move on to the other practices of like, that it's the hardest and best part of the therapy really is, or the work that we do is that engagement, the touching, the getting to know, it's the most vulnerable, but people listening, I don't think, again, seeing from where I'm sitting, I don't think I'd recommend trying it by yourself. Like, you need someone to hold that container for you because it feels so vulnerable. And there's so many layers going on to process through and work through. To have you or someone hold that container is so, so valuable. So much data, so much learning, so much knowledge, so much loving. Like, it's just so layered.
And for me, it comes from a place of, I don't want to articulate it, more so of like, if you force it, right? So in my head, I'm like thinking about like, I remember hearing those breaths, Alicia.
Yes. She could hear me through the walls.
Intercession. And I'm like, don't mind that. But like hearing those things and knowing the grounding and work is going, and then also knowing how stubborn you are and being like, no, I'm not doing it. She asked me to write a letter. I'm not going. I'm canceling my appointment. And of course she'd be in it. And I'm like, she sure canceled it. I'm like hearing the breath and like, all but knowing that like, if I was to go and do that on my own.
Yeah.
Right. Like as a practitioner, I'm like, oh, like I have the knowledge or the skill or whatever it is. I know my parts enough that I can go in. I say that really loosely with big air quotes if you're just listening.
Yeah.
I know my parts so well that I can do that on my own. What's true is that coming from a place that I also have sexual trauma, if I bulldoze my way through that, I actually cause so much more harm. There is a really amazing, beautiful healing space that when someone just holds the container and go, look at all your messy, sloppy parts and how stunning are they?
Yeah.
And they get to just be there, how beautiful that is, and just staying there. There's no movement forward or backwards. You just stay right in that space until your parts say, okay, I think we're good now. We can take that, that little toe forward, or maybe it's a whole leap, or maybe it's just one step, or right here for right now is okay. But I think it's really important being like, although we're talking about all this kind of stuff, having someone trained to be able to sit in that space with you is so imperative. And no, it's not us pitching or selling someone. It means it actually is just
true.
Someone external from your place to hold that space for you, so that you get also a corrective experience.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Like sex for me was not safe.
Yeah.
Right. And that part will always show up for me. And knowing that part and being, and probably same for your story too, and for yourself as well, is like, if sex wasn't safe, bulldozing through it undoes a lot of the work that you've probably done to even be sitting in the seat today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's really important, so important, that like having someone beside you to be able to like go through it. And yes, you love your partner or partners.
Yeah.
But like, they can't do that for you.
Not the same.
It's not the same. It is not the same. Your therapist is different from your best friend or your wife or your husband or your partner. It is different. So I think that's really important.
And helping to create that space, like even Brittany helping me create, to be like, hey, hon, I love you, but I got to go do these practices and you're not invited, that was even like awkward for me to be like, sorry, not sorry. And right. Cause my parts were like, oh, this is what you do in your partnership and you do the right. So
if I don't do it, he doesn't love me. And of course, and he's I hate me.
Yeah. It's weird, but so to have a container of permission to create those spaces. And then after having those letters and doing the work, when she would say no, right. My yoni would say no. That was a traumatic, bring that back to me, like, this is what happened. And I had this experience and I listened, and it was really, and right, be able to have, again, a place to process that. Massive. Like, I can't say that enough. Like, I really think you're listening. You recommend you have someone to hold that space for you, because it's powerful. It's really powerful. And of course, you'd always come back and be like, do you see the connections? Do you see what's aligning? Because I'm like, I'm doing this thing. And then this is not even just sex. Like, this is happening in my world. And you're like, well, you did these breath works this week and you did this tantra and you did these color break. I'm doing all the elemental meditations. And I was like, oh, right. I'll put that together. Thanks. Holy cow. There's a lot of, it's shifting so many other things, like literally shifting my universe.
Yeah. And, with the Tantra, especially the Tantra oftentimes can be boxed into a very particular space, because, oh, it's Tantra, it's woo, it's woo, and from my standpoint, Tantra is a spiritual science designed to transform your consciousness in order to realize enlightenment. And the school that I trained with Tantra, and I'm saying this not to be like, oh, this is what I did. I'm saying this that there's not there's a lot of cultural appropriation with spiritual practices, right? There's a lot of that. And the Tantra that I practice is lineage based, and we had to receive permission to teach it. And it's the only government accredited school, I think, still in the world, and is now being taught in colleges as a master's program. And so I say that because the particular avenue that I decided to go with, there's somatics and there's inner child work and there's all of these things, but the Tantra is something that, and I was the same. When most people get into it, they're like, oh, word, I'm going to do this meditation. Okay, like I'll do a meditation. Oh, it's a guided meditation. I'm going to feel relaxed. And I'm like, no, like that's not what this is. Like this is energy work. This is transforming your energy body. This is shamanic work. These are meditations that are working with an elemental system that's over 17,000 years old. And so no matter whatever you're doing, whatever avenue you choose to heal, it's often we can disconnect with, like, there's been so many people that have done this before us, right? Whether it's a therapeutic practice, whatever it is, like there's so many people that have done this before us, and that are like buoying us to support us in these processes. And speaking about the container, I think one of the most important things about any container that where we're receiving support is the container. It's not even necessarily always what you do in the container. It's the container. Like I know myself, like I have a medicine journey guide. I have a somatic therapist that I work with. At this point with my somatic therapist, like I do most of, like, she really just holds the space, and I'm like in and I'm going places, and and she offers her wisdom and her guidance and her support. And a lot of it is just, I just want to be in that container because the container is different. And the more that you're in that container with someone, feeling seen, feeling heard, feeling safe, that's the biggest healing oftentimes. And there's a lot of practices that I do with people that are healing, but some of the biggest healing, and now I'm doing work with groups as well. I have a group program, and it's amazing being in this collective of women where they're all hearing and seeing each other, and they're supporting each other, and we're talking about sex, and it's like chill and it's fun and it's real and it's raw. And this is how we heal. By being in community, whether it's with one person who's a guide or a mentor or many people. And so, yeah, I think the container with someone who is trained and knows what they're doing is really important. And I also think, from a different lens, that we can also create intentional containers within the community of people that we're in as well, in a different way, for different healing, right? To be in communication and be very intentional. Like I want to, like there's men's groups and women's groups where people come together, and this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about sex in this container. And I know people that do that, and it's beautiful. Or kink communities and these kind of containers. Like there are also containers that we can intentionally create around these kind of topics that can also be really healing, in addition to the ones that are really meant for the deeper dive and the deeper healing, and that are helpful to have someone who has, is an expert in their field and what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Is there a, maybe probably a hard question. Is there like a general, theme that you see with your clientele of like, okay, audience,
of course.
What is that? I'm thinking people are listening probably have questions like, what would you say to the general theme that you see as kind of common things that come through your practice? That you said pleasers, but what are kind of some of the common patterns that you see?
So, I have a lot of clients, and then I also just have a lot of talks with people as well that don't necessarily become clients, right? And I think one of the biggest that's coming up is I get stuck in my head during sex. I get stuck in my head during sex. I can't be present during sex. That's a big one. Now, oftentimes, we unpack that. There's a lot going on inside of that. I mean, I think it all comes back, and I've said this so many times, but it all comes back to feeling safe within themselves, especially in relationship to sex. Um, because there's so many people that come to me that just don't have a space or a container to ask these questions, to talk about these things. And so getting caught in my head is a big one. Having just not having an orgasm, or have never had an orgasm, or trouble having an orgasm. That's another one. That's a big one. And I talk about that a lot. So that's, people are like, yes, I want to do this. But I also get a lot of people that have experienced trauma, and they're very clear that they're like, I know that this is still impacting me, even though I've done X, Y, and Z. And in many ways I have healed, and this feels like the next step. That's a lot of times what I get is, a lot of clients that come to me have already done a significant amount of work, or they have practices in place, but they still haven't focused on the sex. And when I ask them what they want, the word that comes up a lot is freedom. They want to feel free. They want to feel free in their bodies. They want to feel free in their sexual expression, and they don't even know maybe what that is yet, but they want that freedom. They want to take off those shackles, or whatever it is, of society, and of maybe their partner, and of their upbringing, and of their religion, or whatever it is that has been piled. There's so much stuff that is piled on us collectively as humans. And then women, that's even, that's a specific things that are piled on top of us. And at the top of that is us being told that our bodies are not our own. I mean, I'm in the States, in the US, and so that's a big one in the US right now for women, is that our bodies are not even our own. And one thing I like to remind people is that even if you haven't experienced, a capital T trauma, or sexual abuse or something like that, that we still, as women, oftentimes have a lot of trauma just by being a woman in this world where we don't feel safe. And that can take a toll on our bodies, and on our genitals, on our vulva, on our yonis. I say to people, like, you could walk down the street and someone could catcall you, and that might not feel safe. That might not feel good. And the body could register that as something. You could have sex that you really want to have, and that feels good, but you don't use lube, or maybe the insertion is a little rough, and the body can take that as something, and create a narrative within the body and store that. And so these are the themes that tend to come up. But the root is all of the stuff that we just take on as we move through the world, and we're on Instagram and social media, and we're watching movies and all of these things of like what it means to be a sexual being, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a sexual woman, what it means to be desired, what sex looks like, what sex doesn't look like, what it means to be a parent in regards to sex. And sex is over once you get married, and penetrative sex is the only form of sex. And an orgasm has to happen for sex to be a success, or sex doesn't end until someone with a penis ejaculates. Like, these are all the things that like are bombarding us on a regular basis. And so most of the time when people come to me to work with me, or to learn about it, or have a conversation, they're bringing a lot of this stuff with them.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Stuff. A lot of stuff. I love the word freedom. When you said, I was like, that's actually kind of the feeling I had as I was layering some of these things. And even like some of the talking about orgasm, some of the early, education you do around, do you know your vulva can orgasm 15 different ways? I was like, huh?
That was mind blowing. Like, she came in and she's like, look
guess
at this.
what?
And she's like, I could draw it.
I drew it out. Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, okay.
I'm like,
So
did you know this?
Supervision today. We're gonna,
yeah. I'm gonna teach you about your vulva today. It's like, your wife's gonna love me.
Yeah. Right. I think what came to my mind when you talk about trauma, and we talk about it in a therapeutic sense, that I think a lot of people think that to go to a therapist particularly a specialized therapist, you have to have some sort of trauma or big event that's happened that like riddles your body and all this fear and all the things. And I need to work through this particular thing. I think for me, for listeners to know, like, you don't have to have sexual trauma. You don't have to be in a car accident or a plane crash to come see a therapist, or doesn't mean that you have to have sexual trauma to see a sex therapist. I heard a definition of trauma one time that said, trauma is a highly emotional event that was processed in aloneness. That's trauma. And that I can't define that for you or for Alicia, for anybody. What your body holds on to, that's what we're getting at. That's it.
Yeah.
Like you said, it could be penetrative sex that insertion was too rough, or someone catcalled you, or something happened at the bar, or maybe you paint this like beautiful picture of when you lose your virginity as a hetero cis woman, and there's candles and roses and all the things, and it's not that. And that could be an event that you hold on to for a really long time that comes with shame and guilt and all that kind of stuff, and you process that in your moments. So that too is just a barrier.
Yeah.
It's not these big events that have to happen in order for you to seek the help that you need in this particular area.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Huge.
And even the idea that we lose our virginity, even that can be a trauma.
Right. Yeah.
Right? That we lose our virginity, that it's something we lose as opposed to like a sexual debut or the first time we've had sex, right? That, and that what that means is that it needs to be a penetrative sex in order to lose our virginity, right? That this misconceptions about the hymen and all of these things that aren't even true. And that creates such a source of shame. And like, that's what I'm hearing, right? Like when we process something alone, or it might not even be processed, right? Like when it's just held alone. Like for me, I didn't process anything for 37 years. I didn't even know there was something to process. And so it's that holding of something that aloneness is what fosters shame. We release shame, we transmute shame by being in conversation, by talking about it and being held in that. And that comes back to the container, whatever that container is to be able to share our lived experience and to recognize that we're not wrong, and we're not bad, and we're not dirty, and there's nothing wrong with us. We're not even broken, right? Like to be able to have that mirrored back is like, we're not a problem to be solved. We don't have to be fixed. Like, I can feel that in my body, to have someone mirror that back, to have someone hold that space in that enoughness, right? Because it's really what it's about, is feeling enough. And well, if I do this, if I get this healing, I'll be enough. Or if I go cross that bridge, I'll be enough. And it's like, nope, you're already enough.
Yeah.
We're just putting some pieces together.
Yeah. Stop looking so hard. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And then I've like another question that kind of, it's not related, but taking a left turn here, but the idea of like, so I'm curious about like the polyamory journey, because I've asked you about it obviously before too.
Sure.
I think there's more than one way to come to that journey. So the idea of like healing, you get this freedom, you're like, oh, it opens up a whole door. That's one maybe road. So I've, questions about how to contain that or not. And then just in general, because, my training of, secure functioning relationships, the duality of that, and how do you, and it's new-ish, it's not really new, actually. It's new to the educational world, right? Yeah. It's new to the therapist teaching world.
Sure.
How we teach and create containers for that. And you're doing it well. And so you teach that well. So if you could speak to just, how to,
thank you.
I mean, people I think that are curious about it, and like, how do they know when it's the right time to consider that, or when it's too premature because they're just exploring their first time climb Mount Everest, and they're just like, wee, at the front, at the top, bring it on. You're like, whoa, slow down.
Yeah. I would say most people don't come into it from like a healed place. I feel like a place of like, now the next step. I feel most people come to it because they are curious about something. And I'm not saying there are people that are very grounded and rooted and secure and can be in this, and they find this and it's like, oh my God, this is like, where has this been all my life? And why didn't I know about this? I have a, person in my life now that was the case for him, of like, why, like, oh, I wish I knew this. I wish I knew this. I wish like different relationship styles were taught to me as a child, which they are being done now. Like now, this generation is just, there's just so much available, which is amazing. But I think, in my experience of what I've seen over the years, I've worked with couples around this as well. And I've dated a lot of people that were in relationships, is that oftentimes the first couple of years are a hot mess. Definitely was for me. And when we talk about a container and a trained professional, I definitely think that if you are in a monogamous relationship and you decide to open your relationship, I think finding someone who specializes in that, someone who specializes in ENM, ethical non-monogamy, or really nowadays we're just calling it non-monogamy because it's ethical if we're doing it. That someone that specializes in that is so important, because there are a lot of therapists, there are a lot of coaches or healers even who will just try to redirect you back into monogamy because that's what they know and that's what they think is best, right? Because that's what they know. And that's not what you need if that's what you're interested in. Now, here's something really important to recognize. Not everyone comes at it from there. Some people are single and they decide that this is I call it a relationship style. It's a relationship style. It's how you're choosing to be in a relationship. The default is monogamy for people most of the time. Most people just think that I'm going to be in a monogamous relationship. Now, though, there's more conversation of what kind of relationship. Like, how would it be if you meet someone that you do want to like settle down with in some way, and you say, what kind of relationship might you want to have? Is it monogamous? Is it monogamish, coined by Dan Savage? Is it polyamorous? Is it open? Is it swinging? Like what might you want to do in this relationship? Doesn't mean we have to do it now, but what could we do? And it's important, though, that if you are in a relationship where you've been in it a while and you transition, that this is not going to be a band-aid. This is not going to fix something. Right? It is not. If anything, it will bring you to task. It will bring everything up, everything. When my partner and I opened our relationship 5 years in, there's this song by this artist, her name's Melody Gardot, and it was called Our Love is Easy. And that was our song. That was one of our songs because our love was easy. It was so chill. And then we opened our relationship. And I will tell you now that if it wasn't for our couples therapist, who I now still work with in a different capacity and have experienced the deepest healing of my life with this person, if it wasn't for me reaching out to him and being like, he's the poly and the queer and all the things that were like speaking to me as a bisexual, polyamorous, kink-centered woman. If we wouldn't have went to that therapist, I don't know if we would still be together all these years later, now 13 years. I don't know. Hopefully. But what it did was it showed there was a lot of cracks in that foundation. We just didn't have to address them. And sometimes that happens in a relationship where someone is securely attached, because oftentimes in my experience, there's a little bit more of they have a capacity to hold more. And I felt safe. And so my stuff didn't come up with him, but it sure as hell came up with all the other people that I started dating. And thank God, because what I realize now is that I wasn't actually in as authentic of a relationship as I could have been in. It was as authentic as it could have been at the time, but it wasn't anywhere near where it is now. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And so I think it's important to recognize that if you're interested in that first, and then this goes back to like one-on-one, what do you need? Why? What's the need in wanting to open your relationship? What's the need? And is opening a relationship the strategy to actually meet that need, or is it something else?
I was going to ask a quick question, mostly because in my experience and the population that listens to the podcast, can you take a hot second just to explain terms like ethical non-monogamous, polyamory, that kind of stuff, just to like swinging. Swinging, even kink. I think a lot of people, that's a word that like,
yeah, I'd love to.
Take a second just to explain some of that, because I know one, being a gay woman, there's an absolute understanding, apparently, that I know all things. And I'm I'm like, listen, just because I'm gay doesn't mean that I know all things about anything, actually. It just means I like women. So me trying to line
Yeah.
that space, because I think once you're part of
Yeah.
like the queer LGBT
Right.
community, that's part of it. So I think taking some
Mhm.
time to define that so that people know. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as like, just because, not the same thing, but it's similar in that, like, just because I'm polyamorous, it means that like I'm having all the sex in all the
Yes,
land,
right.
right? Like, it's like, no, actually a lot of polyamorous people like kind of settle down with a couple people and like chill. And the biggest drama is the scheduling. Like that's,
Yeah.
like, that's the thing, right? And so, yeah, let's talk about it. So non-monogamy. So sometimes people usually call it ENM, ethical non-monogamy. There are, we do try to shift that to non-monogamy because of course it's ethical. Of course we're doing it ethically. Otherwise it would be called cheating.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a difference between cheating and non-monogamy. So non-monogamy is it's really the umbrella when you are choosing to be in a relationship that is basically anything but monogamy, anything but two people exclusive, right? That's monogamy. So non-monogamy is everything else that could look like. So within that umbrella, so think of that as the umbrella, right? Or like maybe a wheel, the spokes of a wheel. Let's say umbrella. Under that umbrella is an open relationship. Now, an open relationship could that has like the most wiggle room, right? That's not polyamory. So open relationship is two people that are choosing to be in relationships outside of their relationship. That sometimes could just be more focused on sex, and there could be some restrictions around that, like it's just about sex and it's not an emotional connection. I have opinions about that because as someone who helps people transform their relationship with sex, I think that sex is always an emotional connection, and that you can have casual, thoughtful sexual experiences and even love someone and also choose not to be in a committed relationship with them, right? So there are some things that oftentimes need to be dismantled around some of the ways that we think. But that's open relationship, in a little snippet, is that it's different ways that you can relate with someone outside of your relationship. And there might be some boundaries around that, what that looks like. Polyamory is more focused on relationships that are more committed, like committed relationships and emotional commitment and connection. And so in some ways, polyamory can look, it could just be multiple relationships like you're used to. However, it's important to recognize that we bring in a lot of baggage of monogamy. And so there's a lot of like sloughing off of the layers of that. So polyamory is when it can be just, it could be solo polyamory, where I am a single person, I am solo, I live by myself, and I choose to have other relationships that are committed relationships, and we can travel together and do all of these different things together. There could be a relationship which I have a nesting partner. We opened our relationship, we were monogamous. Technically we had a commitment ceremony. We're not legally married, but we got married. And we are a nesting partner. So we live together and we have a home and a family with our cat together. And we have other relationships. And then within that, there could be, friendship is really oftentimes centered in polyamory, as platonic relationships are just as important as a romantic relationship. Like my best friend, I consider her my platonic partner, and her and my nesting partner are like two of my core people, the most important people in my life. There are different levels and layers of how we want to be in relationships. So it could be more casual. It could be people we see every now and then. And so that's that. And then there's swinging, which that is very different from polyamory in my experience. That is more about couples. It's couples, and they oftentimes connect with other couples, and maybe they'll swap, or there's hot wifing, there's cup holding, there's lots of things. I'm not going to go into all of that. You can Google some of those things, but these are all things in which you can explore as a couple, being with another couple. And sometimes there's power dynamics in that and whatnot, and that can be really fun. A lot of times people later in life tend to can explore that, although people of any age can. But a lot of times that happens when it's almost like an empty nest thing of like, oh, we have all this space, let's go play. And it's a safe way for a lot of couples to enter in. There's a lot more primacy in that as there is in polyamory. In fact, there's some educators these days who think that in order to be in polyamorous relationships, that like no hierarchical structure should actually exist. There's also relationship anarchy, where there is no like relationships as we know it are not prioritized, and we're really wanting people are showing up, and everyone's not necessarily receiving the same amount of love, but like no one's higher or lower, right? So that's kind of the structure of open relationships, and then ethical non-monogamy. And then kink is really separate from that. You can experience kink and BDSM in a monogamous relationship. You can experience it in a polyamorous, like that doesn't really matter. So there's two separate things. Kink and BDSM, which are a little bit different, is an exploration. So let's talk about like kink in regards to BDSM. It's a exchange of power, of play, of exploration, of desires that are outside of the quote unquote norm, and that there's often a lot of transgression involved to press against something that feels, like a desire that maybe feels illicit, a desire, like, for example, a lot of really like strong, powerful women like to be dominated, right? Like to be submissive, right? It's like, well, what is that? What's at play there? There's a transgressiveness there. People playing different roles, or even being called particular names within, here's this word again, that container, where it's safe and there's safety and there's communication about your needs and what this is going to look like. And so this is such a beautiful way. This can be very healing. It can also be deeply re-traumatizing, right? So it's very important to recognize that you can go into kink situations to be like, I'm going to heal, and it can be re-traumatizing. And it can also be really healing with people who know what they're doing and are experienced.
Yeah, interesting. I've for the first time recently, I've had lots of, not lots, I live in Southern Alberta, so not lots compared to you probably, but lots compared to my colleagues probably, of, people seeking and being curious about open and polyamory. But recently I've had more couples, young couples come in, newlyweds or, in a relationship being like, hey, we want to create monogamy for now, but we want to create the functioning, secure foundation to open it later up, or to have polyamory. And I'm like, interesting. So they're thinking ahead, and they want to help, which is my focus, as creating secure functional relationships. Like, help us create, what are the cracks potentially that could show up as? So I can't, I'm not a crystal ball, but I could be like, I know the generals, I know enough to know what secure function looks like. I teach you all the basics, and well done for coming in, asking those questions early on, thinking maybe where you want to go. So again, new, air quote, if you're listening, air quote, these new, things that we're experiencing in our clinics and things, which is why I think it's important for someone like you to talk about it and explain it. And even the idea of polyamorous, sorry.
Yeah, I did. Well, I think like even in my experience of, having like younger clientele and that kind of thing coming in, and then talking about opening up relationships and poly and all the things, I don't think it's understood what is like really entrenched. Like, as you were explaining it, I'm going like the amount of communication, understanding what you want, going back to your desires, like what is it actually that you need? In my experience, opening air quote a relationship was to save it, and it was like absolutely not. Even now, no. I remember saying this to you, being like, I would love to be in such a confident, secure place that I could be like, whatever. I know wholeheartedly standing here being like, absolutely not. If that would happen, I would wither away. Like, I am too insecure for that right now. Like, there's no way. My parts would get all jangled and all mixed up, and would allow me not to show up more of who I want to be. I would be less than that. And that's not what I want. So as you describe all those things, I'm going like, it's not just that easy, that I'm the new wave, or I'm quote unquote woke, and I can be in these relationships that, I can have multiple partners, and I can do the things, and like, monogamy is not me because it's guarded and downgraded and it's archaic and all the things. It's like, okay, it's okay. But also, do you have the guardrails within you to understand which was that?
Yeah.
It's so important.
So important.
And there's a reason why I think a lot of older couples probably have not, and this is loosely saying like larger capacity to walk into those things because they've had the time, they've kind of vetted themselves in those arenas to be like, yep, I don't think that's what I like. Or this is, I'm okay with going there. There's been a relationship that we've built this over time that we can settle in. And even for you, 5 years, you're like, we opened it up and oh boy, was that exposing, right?
Oh yeah,
So like,
absolutely.
it's not like off the hop for most,
Yeah.
I believe,
Yeah, I
in that
agree.
space. Again, like if you just want to like crack a door open and hope for the best, like, oh
Yeah.
boy, buckle up. I don't think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it depends on the generation. It's like for my generation and our generation, and so, you know, like I guess what is it, like Gen X and boomers? Yes, because we're so entrenched in monogamy.
Yeah.
And the generation coming up, they're not as much. And so what I see is it happening and is going to continue to happen is people are going to just, that's going to be their default. They're going to move into that and start with that, like they're going to start their dating journey from that container because so many people now see it as a possibility earlier on. And so I think it's both. I think it's, yes, for like my generation, absolutely. There's so much unpacking that we need to do because all we knew for so long was monogamy. And that, talking again about that stuff being in our bodies and in our nervous systems, there's a absolute narrative in our nervous systems that being with one partner means we're safe.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily true. People cheat all the time. All the time.
I just meant like being with one person was the most unsafe I was.
Yeah.
Go back to like all my trauma,
Yeah.
all my things. I'm like, actually, that's a no for me. That was actually the worst place I could have been before I
Yeah.
did all my work.
Exactly.
Right?
But we think that like there's definitely a narrative around it. But yeah, most of it, a lot of times, like, no, that's not the case. And so I think though with the younger generation though, like when there's options, like if you go into it, you know, a ice cream shop and it's like vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. Oh, if you want to splurge, you can get some sprinkles. You're like, okay. And that's all you've ever seen. And you're like, great. You know, sometimes I get strawberry and it's really exciting and it's delicious. And sometimes I'll get sprinkles and that's the most amazing thing. And then you go into this other store and you're like, what? There is birthday cake and ice cream and there are gummy worms and ice cream and there's like brambleberry and lavender and what is happening at this ice cream store? Like that's like if you start there, you're like, yeah. This is this is the ice cream. Oh, this is wait, you and you know, not in a shady way of like, oh my goodness, like, well, you only knew strawberry and vanilla and I get that and chocolate. And well, you've known 27 flavors. Oh my goodness. And so I think like more and more people are growing up in the big ice cream store. But you know, we all grew up in the small ice cream store of what was possible. And it was deeply triggering for me, like speaking to what you said, Erin. I was very triggered in a lot of my polyamorous relationships because I was absolutely trying to resource that safety from something that was always moving. And it's taken me years. I've been polyamorous for 8 years now. And so, you know, what I'll say is it like, yes, you can do your work to get up to it and you're going to do the work inside of it. For me, you know, like that was my baby. That was like having the baby and have the big challenge, like all the challenges that come with having a children and this strain it can put on relationship. Mine was opening up our relationship. Like that's what it was for me and my partner. And for me, specifically, that's what pushed me. That's what opened me. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways led me to where I am now with the work that I'm doing and the trauma that I've healed within myself. I think it all is so deeply connected.
Yeah. I think we could talk about these topics for, you know, another 3 hours.
Forever. Yeah.
But it kind of speaks back to kind of circling back to what you said at the beginning is like understanding your needs, understanding your wants, having your boundaries, like going back into that sense of, your own body, your own yoni, all the layers within yourself. Like, I think that's still, when I hear you, so it goes back to that beginning stages of knowing that first, and then sharing that however you choose that feels safe and secure, ethical for you, within a container if you need of safety, of someone to hold that space, help you map it out, is super useful.
Absolutely. And, the last thing I want to say is, and also, Alicia, you mentioned the 15 different orgasms that people with vulvas can have, and people with penises, like different ones. I think also don't be afraid to educate yourself as an adult. Don't be afraid. Like y'all in Canada, I'm in the States, but I think pretty universally that sex education is not great, especially when we were growing up. And so there are things I can guarantee you that you don't know, right? Like there were things that I didn't know. I mean, and now these things we're talking about them, where I didn't know about the clitoris. I didn't know how big, how expansive it was, and the bulbs and the legs and all of those things, and the different types of erectile tissue. And so educate yourself, especially if you have a vulva, because there are so many things that we are not taught around how to be pleasured and how to experience pleasure and receive pleasure. And so, the ability to receive pleasure is an attunement that can happen and needs to happen in your nervous system, not just in your brain.
Yeah. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Boom.
Boom.
Better.
So that is the goal, to learn that. That is a starting, jumping off, journey point, bridge point. That's all the points. It happens in the nervous system, because that's where the healing, the pleasure, the joy, that's the attunements, the breathing. Yeah. That's the centerpiece for sure.
Yes.
For sure. Amazing. I have 100% sure you'll be asked back to explain all those things.
Yeah, I would love to. This was kind of the foundation. Yeah.
This is a good foundation, but I know Erin's brain's like, I have more questions.
Yeah, we can get into the sexy stuff too.
Oh, we're gonna get into it.
Yeah, another day.
Questions, yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, you're the best. Love you. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard today, make sure to share, subscribe, and like our channel, or better yet, share our podcast with others. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Bread Dog Studios production.